Welcome to another episode of Canada's Food and Everything Else Training or Safety Podcast. I'm your host, J.A., and joining me as always, the ever knowledgeable Dominique. Together, we're committed to bringing you the most relevant and engaging discussion around safety in food and beyond. That's why we call it everything else. So in today's episode, we are talking and going to be taking a closer look at HACCP, which, Dominique, what's HACCP stand for again?
Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point.
I think that's what back in the day we used to have to memorize that. That was like a test. What's it stand for? Has that ever changed?
No. It's still part of our food safety course, our food handler course. HACCP, although it's not required in some provinces, it is required in Alberta and Quebec and Nova Scotia and places that where a certain amount of HACCP is required. So it in our newest version of the course, it's covered quite in depth actually. We don't go into the history of that. Me and you will talk about that. Sorry, the dogs are going. I was like,
you know what? That just makes it more authentic, right?
They're having a tug of war with. They've been sleeping all day. I swear to God, they heard we're having mic problems and and they said, let's get in on this.
Exactly. It's not a problem. So HACCP is really I got the Coles notes here for our people that are listening to this. That's old school mentality of Coles notes. But it's a systematic approach to identify, evaluate, and control food safety hazards. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's like a consistent process.
Yeah. What if when we teach this in person, a lot of restaurants would be doing unknowingly HACCP anyway, because before they put anything on the menu, they'll look at a whole bunch of things. Is there a need? Is there, what's the price? Can we make money? They'll do all these things, but they'll also, I think, subconsciously or just by intuitive nature, because this is what they do, they would look at, is my staff capable of doing it? Can I source the product and get it from a safe source? Right?
So it standardizes this.
Yeah, so it standardizes the product, but so we know what the outcome is going to be, and we can predict what the outcome is going to be because we've put all these things in place. Starting with, can I source it and can it be safe as a safe source? We talked about this last time, right? Is if I'm starting with good product or safe product, I've got a lot of good chances of turning out a safe product. So can I source it from a good source? We would say look at a reputable supplier, and then what are the hazards going to be? Okay, I need to cook it. I need to cook it to X temp. Can I do that? Does my grill have the capacity? Does the kitchen have the capacity to do this? How are we going to make sure it happens consistently in fast food operations, in the sophisticated ones, and even not in the sophisticated ones, I guess. The equipment would do some of that, right? The timer on my, you worked at a famous chicken place.
I was gonna say, you're not gonna brand me as the guy that worked at that.
No, I'm not. I'm not gonna. Thanks. But your equipment did some of that for you, right? Press the button, close the lid, and 14 minutes later or something, you know that if you did everything right, it's going to come out. It's going to be safe. You can check the temp and bingo bango, it's all cool. And that's the same for the fast food hamburger chains. They can put 12 patties down and close the lid.
That HACCP, now is HACCP in all establishments? No.
HACCP isn't even a mandated requirement in most. So, a facility can choose to have HACCP because they want to have it in place.
So it's not mandatory.
It's not mandatory. The cool thing is, British Columbia has what's called the need for a food safety and sanitation plan. So before you open your restaurant, you're kind of doing HACCP. It's HACCP based. It's based on the principle of HACCP. So you have to lay out, here's what we're going to make. Here's how we're going to protect it right from when we purchase it to when we serve it. So they make you lay that out. And what I was getting at earlier is, I think restaurants, when a chef or a cook or the owner puts something on the menu, they would go through all these things just by nature, right? Where am I going to get it? Oh, I can get it. It's a safe supply. I can get it. The price is good. The price is consistent. Having that sort of process in place allows you to turn out good food. HACCP was, I think kind of the brief history was, why is it there? Is NASA, when they were sending somebody into space, and I'll give you again the short version of this, in class is, what could go wrong in space, right? If you're sending somebody to the moon,
nothing at all.
Nothing at all. And one of the concerns was, hey, how about if they get sick? What's going to happen? Diarrhea in space is messy. It's shitty.
It's probably not. I was going to say, it's probably not a good thing.
So
that cutout button didn't happen either.
Yeah, it could be messy. So NASA said they had some big company. I think as all things happen, anytime government's involved, it can get off the rails pretty fast and get really expensive. They said to the company that was doing it, how are you going to make sure it's safe? And they started this long process, and months and months later, nothing happened, and it was starting to get into the millions of bucks. So they hired Pillsbury of all people, and said,
"Are you kidding me?"
Pillsbury, yeah, really, Pillsbury, and said, how are you going to keep? What can you guys do? And the idea of hazard control was around.
Yeah.
And NASA already had what was called HACCP in place for building the components of the rocket and anything else, which was, let's look at the hazards, let's look at what could go wrong, and how are we going to prevent or eliminate or at least reduce the risk. And when Pillsbury came back with their proposal, NASA said to them, hey, can you take this sort of concept that we use and apply it to this, because then we'll understand it and we'll know it's going to work because this is what we use. And hence, HACCP came around, and that hazard analysis critical control point, nothing really happened, until the mid 70s. I was reading again about this today because of our talk. In the U.S., there was a botulism outbreak linked to canned mushrooms in the U.S. And then
how long ago?
Early 70s, 72, 73, something like that. And then I think the Department of Agriculture down there, or the FDA, one of the two, said we need something in place. And what they came up was the low acid food program that said, hey, for low acid foods, because the mushrooms were low in acidity, would control a hazard. If you had high acid food, if it was something pickled, well, the acidity would control the hazard because it was acidic enough. But in low acid canned food, the acid isn't can control it. Well, how do we control it? And canning, it's been around for a long time, but associated with, you and I would probably remember recalls associated with botulism to canned food. It happened.
Now, I was going to ask you this, because is this true around the dented cans? People used to say, don't buy a dented can because of the botulism. Is that true?
Probably not botulism, something else, because if oxygen got into a dented can, botulism's not the problem anymore, because botulism happens when there's no oxygen.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Botulism.
Now, how bad is botulism? It doesn't sound good.
Well, it could kill you, paralyze you.
Serious? It can paralyze you?
Yeah, and kill you.
Jesus.
10 years ago, there was a botulism case in Ontario, a bunch of cases, and in the U.S. We'll name them. I don't think they're our customer. Bolt House Farms had this carrot juice.
Okay. Can I remember this?
Like a fresh
I
carrot
remember.
juice
I remember reading
or
this.
something like freshly squeezed. Anyway, the story I saw that I can remember still to this day. Anyway, a bunch of people around the U.S. and in Canada got sick from botulism, and they're trying to trace.
No cure.
Well, is there a cure? I guess it's rehab, because the paralyzation can go away over time. But if it doesn't kill you, right? Because if it paralyzes you, then you can because your throat doesn't work, your lungs don't work, you could die from it. So the story around that Bolt House Farms thing was that a bunch of people got sick. They were buying this freshly squeezed carrot juice that was supposed to be super healthy. When they started to put it all together, the common denominator was there was a kind of all like athletic people doing jogging or going to the gym, and they buy this half-liter thing of carrot juice, and what they think was happening, you buy it in the grocery store in the refrigerator. People were taking it to the gym or taking it on their jog or taking it on their walk, and it was just sitting out at room temp. So that bacteria, the Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria itself, grows and multiplies. And as it's growing and multiplying, it produces a toxic waste. And when you consume that waste, that toxin, that's what causes botulism in the person. And the one story from Toronto was, I'm pretty sure she was an international ballroom dancer. This lady, I'll find the news.
All coming back. No, I think you're right.
Yeah, I'll send you the link after. But the story on the news was 10 months after she was just learning to walk again. It was crazy. So HACCP, I'm going to say Bolt House. I don't know the history, but Bolt House Farms for sure had a HACCP plan in place for making that juice.
Yeah.
And for making sure it was transported properly and all the way right to the grocery store. What they didn't maybe consider as a possible hazard, and this is where sometimes things go wrong, is when it gets into the consumer's hand, how much abuse can it take
before it goes over?
Yeah, and when you're talking with a fresh product.
So Dominic, is there safety then? Like, is there?
It probably depends on
like a threshold.
I don't know what the amount of botulism toxins you need to kill you or paralyze you, right?
No, but like people, maybe I rephrase that, but it's the fact that like how far a product can be misused.
Oh,
do people consider that when they create some products?
No, I probably yes, but the reality is it says keep refrigerated. What's going to happen after? So the consumer always has a role to play, and the consumer, the manufacturer of the product, even the restaurant in takeaway or take home, this is why we really strongly encourage is give those instructions, give those safe food handling instructions, so that at least we're educating the consumer on here's what needs to happen. Can they abuse it? 100%. Did you do your part and say, yes, I did my part? If you didn't, then that's still on us, right? That's still on us as the provider. And what can we have done better? Well, we could have made the warning bigger, or we could have, in takeaway, we could say, here's how to reheat it. Here's, hold it only for so long.
Okay, so I've got so many questions. You always cause this, and we go along because I have so many great questions on this because it's such a.
So HACCP evolved anyway. I think if we went back just a couple steps, HACCP evolved out of that, and then eventually we got what's called the Codex, where internationally a bunch of countries got together and decided that this is what HACCP should look like. from an international perspective. So everybody was operating at the same standard.
So does everyone then? So it's not a regulation for restaurants and food establishments.
No, it is not a regulation.
It's a best practice.
It's a best practice, and you would have. We would see HACCP plans or sort of HACCP-based systems in place in a senior's home, in a hospital, in a dormitory, or in some school systems or some universities, or contract feeding or cafeteria, something like that, right? They would have HACCP or some sort of HACCP-based system in place where they're like we talked about the restaurant, right? The restaurant, before they put that on the menu, they're going to go through these steps. And BC, to their credit, they tell a restaurant, hey, before you open, you have to do a food safety plan.
Now, just wait a second. Let's get on that, because that's a great idea. So that's just BC. They have to do a food safety plan. Is there a structure for that?
There is, and they have some good resources on the BC CDC site. And maybe we can put those links in, and we'll throw those in the newsletter that we put out on how to build that. It's a good exercise, because it'll walk the restaurant through kind of the steps that I was talking about, that the restaurant might, or the manager or chef might be doing in their head, right? Here's what I'm going to do. This walks them through it. In BC's case, they submit it to public health, and public health helps them or approves it and says, yeah, it sounds like you got this under control. Cool. And just that little step helps prevent, if it saves one foodborne illness outbreak, it's worth it.
Well, it goes back to our conversation many times now. We always go back to, it takes one burger or a mistake to ruin a career, ruin a business.
And then never mind the guilt you feel for making somebody sick.
Well, I know in Calgary, I'm not going to name locations, but there's a name of a restaurant. I remember, and I think it was E. coli. They went in there, and they had to send out a notice to everyone that had went to that restaurant by our office in Calgary, and everyone had to get a shot for it or something. They called it the McNeedle. Oops. So but you know what I'm saying? Like, is that, like, a lot of that is just unpreventable? Or does this
that was Hep
take this away?
That was Hep A.
That was Hep A.
That I say, yeah.
Now it's from an employee, not the food.
It was from an employee. It was from an employee who traveled overseas, had come back and was infected with that, and then worked in the restaurant. And there was some reported illness with it, right? So around your Calgary office, a contract feeder. Well, sorry, they weren't a contract. They were like a central commissary.
Yeah.
And they were they had a similar incident for businesses in Southeast Calgary, where they sent out a warning to say, hey, if you'd been to here, their central commissary, because they had this sort of central kitchen, and or if you've eaten from any of these food trucks, because that's what these guys did, is they made sandwiches and breakfast meals and all sorts of meals for all these coffee trucks, right? The coffee trucks that would go around to construction sites and stuff like that, and a similar thing. And places like that would benefit from HACCP, because you would lay out, here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to prevent risk, right? Here's how we're going to prevent these things by having, the scary thing about HACCP is when people start reading about it, they start.
Usually it's a huge binder. That's all I remember. It's a big binder.
But is that like, was that from like a restaurant perspective that you?
You keep referring to me working at one.
Any restaurant. Did you have it at any restaurant? It doesn't have to be that place.
Yes, we've had it. That's why I remember the big binder.
Okay.
Right? And it was the corporate locations that I had worked at that took it very serious, right? And that's what I seem to feel, is it's always like these corporate identities.
And I think it was a pretty good buzzword way back. Like, we still get people that call us and say, hey, I need to get HACCP in place, and they want a certificate. I was like, well, no, you understand that it involves all this stuff? No, we just need HACCP certification.
Is it also outside of food service too? Tell me.
Oh yeah, well, it's mostly in manufacturing, in food
Okay,
manufacturing. And
pools. I remember pools. Is it like pools and recreational too?
no
No.
pools,
Well,
no,
I just thought with the chemicals and stuff like that.
no, no.
No.
That would be Wemyss.
Oh, that's Wemyss. We'll talk about that one
We'll
next
talk
show.
about that one too. Yeah,
That's a great one.
good segue, Jay.
I know, hey, but no, seriously, like I always get them mixed up. Now, are
Yeah,
those? Is
yeah. There's all
Wemyss
these
also
acronyms floating around, eh?
it's too much?
We got
I can't
PPE.
handle it.
We got what else do we got? We got a couple other ones. We got TDG.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, yeah.
No, on the HACCP side, um, really processing is where it's mostly used. And on the
Oh,
processing
manufacturing.
side, if you think about it, HACCP, if you really boiled it down, is food safety before you ever made the food. You haven't made anything, you haven't touched anything, you've just laid out, kind of like what BC has said. Tell us what you're going to do, what you're going to use, and how you're going to keep it safe, right?
So I have a question for you on
Yeah.
this, because I just keep chatting on this because it's so good. Is why does, and I don't want to get into the political side of this, but it seems like BC really takes a lot of these processes serious than the rest of the country. Is that normal, or is it just the way that it's been?
I'll give credit to Alberta, and I'll give even credit to Quebec here. I think BC, because they had, and I don't know the history of it, so don't quote me on this. We'll try and get somebody on from BC to come and talk with us one day about how the BC they have what's called the BC CDC, so the British Columbia Centers for Disease Control, to which their food safety training program falls under. So as food safety falls in there, and then anything related to food and small non-CFIA food manufacturing would be under this BC CDC and public health inspection. So I think their history around having that center for the Centers for Disease Control and food safe, that program falls in there. Having that from a historical perspective has allowed them to do some pretty cool things. This food safety plan being one. To Alberta's credit, they came out with a program that was not implemented and not a requirement, called Serving Safer Food. It's, again, not a mandatory program, but it was really geared towards not a restaurant, but this sort of next level, a food cafeteria, a central commissary, a cook and chill facility that's making food to distribute to other locations, right? So they came up with this Serving Safer Food, again, that was HACCP based, to try and, a central commissary versus a restaurant is more like a food manufacturer than a restaurant, right? It is, just because of their processes and how they do things, and they're distributing food to multiple locations. So they're not big enough and producing enough food to fall, and they're not shipping out of province, so they're not going to fall under CFIA, but they're making and shipping enough food to that a lot of stuff could go wrong. So having a HACCP-based system, even though it isn't a requirement, is really smart to put in place. So Alberta came up with their program kind of like this, a little deeper than the food safety plan, because the food safety plan in BC is for anybody opening any kind of food business. And we think that's a good thing.
So do you think there will ever be a program that's national? Because that's what blows my mind, is everything's different across each province because it's provincially.
You said you don't want to talk politics, right?
I know. I don't want to talk politics, but I want to, like, will that ever change, or is it always going to be like that?
They have a national committee that the provincial health departments get together, or whoever looks after food safety. They do have a national sort of coordinating committee that gets together, and they've come up with the Food Retail and Food Services Code to kind of say, Here's what food safety standards should
Okay.
look like. So there is that body there already, and it's safe to say that they do a pretty good job. And given their political masters, right? So as much as if you put all the food safety people in one room, they pretty quickly come up. As much as they'd all have their own say on everything, they'd come up pretty quickly with a standard that they would love to see implemented. That food retail and food services code. What do we have? We have 10 provinces, 3 territories. Only 2 provinces have it as part of their food regulation, Alberta and Nova Scotia.
Really?
In Alberta, we say this code, and each province can have their own version of the code. Here's the other, back to politics. Alberta and I think Nova Scotia have said this code, our version of it, forms part of our food regulation.
Really?
Yeah. And I think NWT references it, so I think it'd be cool. It would make it a lot easier for multi-provincial operators, like national operators, to operate, because the standards would be all pretty close to the same. They're all close now. Like, let's not kid ourselves. They're close. They're closer than they have ever been. But like we said, last week, Ontario just came out, 5 years ago with individual health units are not approving food safety courses, right? And individual health units aren't going to say who needs it or who doesn't. The province didn't have a province-wide standard. It just happened, right? So
it's
now,
crazy.
now it's there. Will we see HACCP? I think, like anything, something drastic would probably have to happen.
That's the sad part, right? And usually changes only happen after something dramatic happens, right?
And maybe the reality is, like we've said, most restaurants do a really good job. They're taking the training.
Well, I was going to say
even though they're not being told to take the training. They understand HACCP. We get some questions after the fact, after people have taken our course and said, "Hey, I'd like to do the next level, and I'd like to do HACCP just for my own knowledge." And I think here's the other cool thing that's happening: restaurants are now seeing the possibilities of making their food to sell outside of their restaurant. Hey, I'm going to make this, and I can place it at the
huge business.
The local grocer wants it because they want local, and they want cool, and they want innovative, and they want new, and they want stuff that's popular, right? So there's an opportunity for the restaurant to get into that at the local level, and maybe even at the provincial level, and they need HACCP. And if they can put HACCP, we're working with a chocolate company right now to do HACCP training. They're not required to have it. But
it looks good. But it's good. It's good to have. It looks good too.
They're required to have it because of labeling. So the CFIA's there saying, "Well, what about the labeling and what?" And they're like, it's chocolate but there's allergens. So the more we're talking with that company, the more they're understanding, well, crap, we're doing a lot of this already, right? Because they're doing lot coding, and they're doing tracing, and they're keeping their ingredient lists, and they've already got standardized formulas, and they're doing a lot of the stuff already. So putting a formal plan in place, it's going to be a pain. And usually when the government tells us to do something, nobody likes it. Right? So we're not government. Like, I want everybody to remember, we are not.
I was going to say, we never talk politics. We just kind of dance around it a little.
From that perspective, HACCP would be really important. And when you can reassure your customers that you're operating under these principles, it gives that level of safety. Now, just saying it isn't enough. You have to do it, right?
Yeah, true.
So You don't have to take our training. You can go and.
But you know what? You make it easy though, right? You guys make it easy.
Yeah, our HACCP training that we sell is recognized by the International HACCP Alliance. So again, because it's sort of this voluntary system, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, and the HACCP training providers were kind of all over the map. You could have Jay's HACCP. And
are you kidding me?
For sure. Why not?
This is like the wild, wild west.
Exactly. When we started selling HACCP, that's exactly what I said, because in another part of my career, we did food processing inspection.
Yeah.
On a GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, said, like HACCP said with the Codex, hey, let's all agree on what HACCP looks like. What the GFSI sort of standard came out is internationally, non-government agencies got together and said, hey, why does an audit of a food processing plant in England or the UK, what's different about that audit there than an audit that's happening in Calgary, Alberta, or Toronto, Ontario, or in Atlanta, Georgia? And the reality is none. The safety is the safety. So if I'm selling to Walmart or Cisco or Safeway or Sobeys or Loblaws, all of those companies want safe food. So having a HACCP standard in place, that's cool. Okay, we know HACCP is this sort of standard. And we know from the inspection perspective, now through this GFSI, this Global Food Safety Initiative, the inspection standards are the same. Wow. So when that inspection standard came about, this GFSI, HACCP and HACCP training was part of that, because part of that facility inspection would say, hey, quality assurance manager Jay at XYZ Processing, where's your HACCP training from? And you'd say, oh, I got it from Cracker Jack Inc. and me, the auditor, would say, oh, cool, Cracker Jack Inc. I thought they just made caramel corn. And you'd say, no, they got a HACCP training division, right? And all of a sudden, there was a question around, did that training meet this international agreed to standard as far as HACCP principle to the Codex? So out of Texas A&M, those guys said, hey, we'll coordinate this as part of some sort of project. So what they did is they formed this international HACCP alliance that does a bunch of stuff. And one of them is to recognize the training standard for HACCP. So
that's nuts.
Of course, well, it's good, right?
It's absolutely great, like, but it's safety. How do you keep track of this stuff?
It's hard.
No, like honestly,
it's really hard.
Wow.
But we've been at it for 20 years. We know a little bit of stuff, right? We know that it's hard. Yeah, we know. This is why, as much as we beat up on government and everybody, this is why I have so much compassion and I feel sorry for them, because oh my goodness, it's so many things, many things. And so wanting to have HACCP in place, kind of like BC or in Quebec, they have the biggest requirement for covering HACCP in our food safety training. They're the ones that insist on the most amount of knowledge to put out there, more than any province. But even in Quebec, HACCP or HACCP-based or food safety plan is not a requirement. So they want us to teach it, which is good.
Wow.
The knowledge out there. It's hard. I understand.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know
I
how you keep
understand it from both
track.
sides. It's like I'm personally, the more information I'm exposed to, the better, because I believe in learning and keeping on random stuff. I watch a lot of stuff about planes. I'm never going to fly a plane. I just want to know how they crash and why, right?
I have a question though for you. This is totally off topic, but are you a safe guy? Like, do you find yourself being safe all the time? Like, you go out, you're safe. Like, are
No,
you a
I
safe guy? Like,
I think
you find yourself safe?
I think I think I'm average. I don't think I'm necessarily safe. I make mistakes at home. I
Okay.
get caught. Um, uh,
Okay.
I'm I give myself grace because, hey, if I'm at home and I make me sick, I'm just going to be me, right? But
Okay.
in general, I've had people tell me that, I I'm good at helping others be safe. I
Yeah.
think I'm safe, but yeah,
I'm terrified. I'm always like freaking about worried about stuff. I don't know why.
I'm good on temps at home. I'm very aware of that. Really good on cleaning and separation and having multiple cutting boards and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay.
I go down the stairs holding the railing. I've done that for probably 20 years.
You
So
are safe.
I
You are a
probably
safe
am,
guy. Yeah, that's what I'm
right?
saying is you entrench it, right? But here, why I say this is because my daughter and me were looking at some stuff in the fridge the other day, and I actually from one of our shows, I think it was the previous one that we just recorded, is that I was mentioning something from the show to her. I'm like, look, he's already got us thinking about safety at home. I'm looking at chicken breasts. We were looking for the due date and stuff.
And chicken, if they're fresh, they don't, right? They just have a packed on date.
No, but they have. Well, that's a question we were going to ask you. So, do they have to? I was told that fresh chicken has to have a due date. Now,
I
does
don't
it?
think so. No,
No.
no.
It's what is it nice to have or is it
Nice
mandatory?
to
Or
have. I think
really?
it's optional though. I don't think I'm pretty sure it's not a requirement.
Ground beef,
No,
same thing?
no, same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
No
And
way.
here's the other thing. Guess what? On frozen food, the CFIA calls it a durable life date. If it's
Yeah.
more than 90 days of a durable life, there is no date requirement. I could just have a lot code on there or something. I don't have to have
Serious?
a best before date.
See? We could just keep asking you questions all day.
Yeah.
Try to
So
walk around the house. What about this? What about that?
I think
So
at home,
we have to do a
what can I
show
say?
on due dates. I want to
Yeah,
do a
we
full show on
probably
due
should.
dates. Yeah, because there's so I have due like why is there due dates on chips? Who did that?
Probably the chip guys.
I was gonna say who came up with that? The chip. I've
Well,
seen
they're
it
not
on
new, right? I
Pop.
think they're best
Pop.
before. But chips go skunky, don't they?
They
They
do.
go
They go,
stale.
yeah, but I don't know. They don't last much at our house. But
Okay.
I was thinking like Pop too. Like why? Where did the
I
Pop
think
dates
way
come up?
back, Pop never used to have it.
No,
No, Pop
not too far
never
back.
did.
Don't make us sound too old.
Yeah, but Pop never did, and it really comes down to um, plastic versus metal cans. Like on
Is
the
it
plastic one lasts
but it absorbs into the drink?
it doesn't absorb into the drink. There's actually what's called oxygen transfer through the plastic out, right? So eventually your 2 liter pop of carbonated beverage would go
Yeah,
flat over probably a couple years. I don't know how long.
yeah,
Don't ask me that. I don't know. But there's a life where it's going to go bad. If it was in a can or a glass bottle, you'd
yeah.
probably get 50 years out of it, right? And it would be fine. And a lot of that has to do with the amount of sugar that's in it. More sugar,
Mm.
less chance of growth. Right?
All right. Well, we got to wrap this up. We're not going to hit our mark.
No.
I'll have to edit some stuff out.
Yeah, we never
But-
really covered the HACCP, but HACCP's important.
Well,
HACCP,
I think it is. I think it is important, right? But is there anything else you want to touch on HACCP
I
as we
would think
wrap
if
up?
people are considering HACCP, email us and ask us for the links to the food safety plan. I think because that's a
That's a
good
great
little
idea.
exercise. It is a good idea. it helps walk you through as a restaurant. If you're in the food service, a restaurant, a small restaurant, a big restaurant, if you're going to be doing any manufacturing or any sort of food processing to sell outside of your business in any big way, having a HACCP plan is going to be important, because that's going to allow you to consider all the hazards. How am I going to keep this safe? Because it's not just staying in my restaurant now. It's going to go to a distribution center, or it's going to go to a warehouse somewhere, or even if it goes directly to the consumer and it's going to be sitting in their fridge or their freezer for 3 months or 6 months, you don't want to be faced with a recall. And food manufacturers put HACCP in place to protect the consumer. But if you think about it, if I made 50,000 1 kilo lasagnas and I had to recall those, what's that costing me?
Yeah, I know.
It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Well, I think that's the thing that you're teaching us, is all these things about just those precautions are going to save a lot of businesses. How many do you have a weird stat or anything on how many businesses close because of food safety infringements a year?
Oh, I don't. I'm going to go look for it. It's going to be hard to know, because just like restaurants that are closed for food safety infractions, they'll say closed for renovations and they'll hide their closure order.
Serious?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But Alberta took it to a new level because there's a website. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's a website in Toronto too. Alberta has a website.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of BC has a website. Now the closures don't necessarily always get media attention, right? They get media attention when maybe a lot of people got sick, or somebody noticed it. But there's closures every week, every day, probably in some places that aren't publicized in any big way, right? So, like, would you know? Hard to know. Would you know why they're closed? Hard to know. Does making anybody sick help your business? Absolutely not. It's not good business, making people sick.
No, it's not a good thing.
Right? So, putting programs in place, training, investing in your staff, to train them not only helps your business, but it helps them, and it's the right thing to do. So you don't have to take training from us. You don't have to, putting programs in place to keep your customers safe is part of what you should be doing for your business, period.
Yeah, period.
Right?
Exactly.
Just like you would do anything else, right? You're going to invest in yourself to make your food safe and your business safe and consumers safe by extension.
That's going to go a long way. That's going to go a long way. Awesome. Well, let's wrap up today, because this has been once again a phenomenal conversation. You bring so much information to us. I'm not kidding you. I love it.
So let's say for today, HACCP training, we'll give away one. It's worth $250.
Holy cow. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that. We'll put the link in the bottom.
Yeah.
You can send a message to Dominic about getting that and getting set up. And there's other information you're going to put in the bottom, and we'll put in the link.
Yeah.
You guys can review it.
If everybody bears with us, I think we're just still working our way through how to make this the best we can.
Yeah, exactly.
We're having a lot of fun.
We're having a lot of fun, but that's the best thing. We're real authentic. It's the best thing. We like talk. Well, I love learning. You're teaching me all these things. WHMIS is next, though. I think we got to tackle WHMIS.
Yeah, we're going to tackle. Yeah, that's cool, because that's something that a lot of places don't do. And
is it mandatory?
It is.
Okay, HACCP isn't. WHMIS is. So WHMIS has got to be pretty serious.
And WHMIS is easy. Like, overall, it's easy. HACCP could be harder, right? WHMIS is easy. WHMIS is really about knowing the labels and having, we'll talk when we talk. COVID brought out the WHMIS police in a lot of places, because all of a sudden businesses were using all kinds of crazy disinfectants trying to make their place safe, and nobody knew what the hell was going on.
Oh no, that is I can only imagine. Right? That is a huge discussion.
If the poor businesses didn't have enough going on, right? And all of a sudden,
I know.
Yeah.
Let's come in. What cleaners are you using? Like, that's crazy.
Where's the training for your staff? And
where's your training for your staff?
We train dentist associations buy WMIS from us, believe it or not.
Serious.
We're food guys mostly, right? But we're everything training in the last 5 years. But we sell WMIS to all sorts of different companies.
It's crazy. Well, thanks again, Dominic, for being on the show and doing all this stuff and bringing all this knowledge to us, the industry, everyone in and around the world, because we're all over the world. About this amazing information. I just can't thank you enough. It's been outstanding. And for everyone else, remember, if you got questions or comments or other topics that you want us to talk about or ask Dominic, send it in to us, DM us, message us, ask us. You know where to get us. And if they want to find more information about your world, Dominic, they can go to your website. What's your website again?
Safecheck1.com is where all the training is. Safecheck1.com. Yeah.
There you go.
I think the link will be somewhere here. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put it in the bottom as well.
Yeah.
And for next time, we're going to go WMIS next time. And I'm excited about that, especially because it's going to, I'm just, like, this
that might be the first time that ever got said, Jay. I don't know. We might have to trademark that. I'm excited.
We're going to trademark that one?
Yeah, I'm excited about WMIS. Like,
well, first of all,
I'm going to send that to the WMIS board in Ottawa and say, hey, this guy said this, just so you know.
And honestly, it's a wild, wild west, and you're showing us a whole new world I never knew about. So anyways, thanks to everyone, and tune in next week. We'll be back.
Thanks, Jay. Take care.
You bet. Cheers.